Hi, good morning, it's Hope. Welcome to Bored Housewife of Silicon Valley. Today, we're doing a bit of a follow-up to a previous video where it was one of my book blog vlogs, and I talked about ranking my interest in a couple of the prize-nominated novels recently, namely the International Booker and the Women's Prize in Fiction. So today, we're going to talk about the few that I've been able to get my hands on. I've been able to get my hands on 3 from those prize lists, and as well, I was able to read one from the Canada Reads Award. Canada Reads is a very different type of book award, but I always enjoy following who's been nominated. I don't watch the episodes because it seems to be it's a 5-day process, and each day one book gets eliminated, and every day there's a kind of a discussion on the book and general topics and how the book could be really good for society at large, like why they should read it. And by the end, it's whittled down to one winner. And this year, the book that I'm reading is not the winner, but I think it was a semi-finalist. I'm pretty sure it made it pretty far into the week. But I always just, like I said, I enjoy that award. And, you know, being Canadian, it warms my heart to read some Canadian authors, even though living in America, it can be challenging in libraries to find said authors, but this one they had, I read, enjoyed. So I've got 4 books spread over 3 awards that we're going to talk about. First up, I read Boulder by Eva Baltazar, translated by Julia Sanchez. This is up for the International Booker. This, you will know if you've watched a previous video, was kind of down near the bottom of my list of interest, namely because it's a lot about motherhood, and that's not a topic that is particularly interesting to me. But I saw it on the bookshelves on my library available, and I thought, I gotta grab it because I am limited in what is available to me, particularly from the International Booker. My library doesn't have a lot of them. And this is a super tiny little thing, so I was like, I could get that out in an afternoon. It took about an hour and a half to read. And it follows Boulder, who is a cook, and she is kind of traveling all over the place, cooking on different boats and in different places, and is a bit of a nomad. She lives a bit of a nomadic life, and then at some point she meets this woman, and they meet in, I believe they meet in South America somewhere. Anyways, because of the library, a lot of the stuff is covered up, so I'm like, I'm pretty sure they meet in South America somewhere, and they fall in love, and eventually they move to Reykjavik. And when they get there, over the years, it turns out that this woman wants a child, and Boulder does not want a child, but she doesn't communicate that to her partner, and so things get a little complicated. This is very much stream of consciousness. There's very little dialogue. I actually don't think there's any dialogue in the whole thing as I power through. No dialogue. There aren't any really, there are small little breaks, but I don't think that there are any, there are chapters. Okay, so it's an easy read because it's very broken up into little moments, I guess, but it is streamed together really well. The story, actually, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind the character at all. Like I said, the overarching theme isn't something that I'm particularly drawn to, but I thought in terms of capturing my interest in a theme that I'm not drawn to, I think it did a really good job. If you want a more in-depth review of this book, I would recommend watching Jen Campbell's reading vlog on the International Booker, because she quite liked this, and she does a much better, thorough analysis of what this book has to offer. And because she liked it, I think she might be a better person to listen to. But if you like a small little thing, translated fiction, up for an award, it's definitely worth picking up. It's not too, you're not dedicating too much time to it, so it's easy. The other International Booker Prize I got was Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov, translated by Angela Riddell. this was at the top of my interest list for the International Booker. I have to say overall with the International Booker, there wasn't anything that I was really like, oh, I have to read that immediately. But this was the one that I thought sounded most intriguing. I think the premise of this book is really cool. It starts with this person who, well, I guess it's kind of a pair of people, and they set up these rooms that are very similar, reminiscent of places of different time periods. So there's a room dedicated to the 60s, the 70s, 80s, etc. And they talk about how over time, you know, you'll get the 2000s and the 2010s. And it's for people who essentially are losing their memories, and there's some comfort in them going back to this time when they were younger, or whatever it may be. The nostalgia factor really takes hold, and they find themselves drawn to these rooms. But as time goes by, what you're noticing is that people who aren't losing their memories are drawn to these time periods, and they just want to sit in what a room would look like when they were a child. And then it kind of begins to expand out to society at large, where, you know, people in Parliament start dressing up like members of Parliament would have dressed up in a certain time period, and then countries are going to referendums about moving back in time and living like they were in the 1970s, and all over Europe this is taking place. And it's quite a fascinating look at history, and it really reminds me of how history always repeats itself. We see it a lot in, well, the easiest one for me is to describe would be in fashion. You always see it, like we're going back to the 80s, we're going back to the 90s. And let me tell you, when the 90s started coming back, I just felt gagged, because who wants to go back to the 90s in fashion? But it's that progression, and then realizing that, oh, maybe the future isn't really what we wanted it to be, and then coming back to the comfort of the past. But the past, you can't ever go back there. And it's a really interesting premise. I thought it started to drag a little bit at the end, and I think that you having a firmer grasp of some more specific parts of European history would be helpful, particularly Bulgarian history, because it's a Bulgarian man who is the main character. And so I did feel like I was missing a little bit because I don't have that knowledge, but you don't need it. But I think that there would be more to this book if you had it. But it's a really interesting look, character study. Again, very short little vignettes through this person's story, and I did enjoy it. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I thought I would based on what I was expecting from the premise, but it was still a good read, and I'm glad I was able to get to it. The only book from the Women's Prize in Fiction I've been able to get my hands on so far is Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes. This is a Greek mythological retelling of Medusa's story, and I am not a Greek mythology fan. They're not something, again, similar to Boulder. It's just not a genre that I am it's not a genre I'm drawn to. It was fine. It's a very easy read. It's big print, easy storytelling, but you're following so many characters, and I don't think you need a background in Greek mythology, but there are definitely some things that come up that they kind of wink to at the end of a chapter, that if you had that knowledge, you would understand what that kind of nod to is. And I just don't have that, and is not something I'm likely to pick up. One thing about this book is every character is a jerk. All the gods are jerks. All the non-gods, the mortals, they're just all crummy people which I find entertaining at least. But if you're into Greek mythology, I can imagine that this is definitely something that a lot of people would really enjoy, because the storytelling is good. It's just not something that I gravitate towards. And then finally, actually the book that I would have been most excited about, had you put all four in front of me at the beginning and said rank them, this one would have been the first one, and it does end up being my favorite. It's the Canada Reads nominee, and that is Greenwood by Michael Christie. And this follows essentially 3 generations of people and their connection through this island in BC that is being preserved because kind of all the trees through the world, something is going on, and there's something called the the withering, and a lot of trees have been diseased and they're not there anymore, and there just appears to be a lot of environmental conflict happening in the world. And you start on this island that has been preserved, and this woman who takes what they call pilgrims out for tours around this island. And then it follows, kind of backtracks her story from her parents and then her grandparents and so on, and how this island came to be and her connection to it. And I really enjoy it. It's a family story, and it touches on, well, it takes place in British Columbia, and BC is just one of my favorite places on the planet. I lived on Vancouver Island for several years. It has my heart. I love British Columbia so much, and so that in itself, just the environment, and then talking about walking through these massive trees, I could be there. It is a thing that I have experienced, and so I think the overall environment and ambience of this book really spoke to me. And then the characters and their struggles were so real and were so well fought and well described and well written that I enjoyed this book so much. It's 500 pages. I read it in a day. Like I devoured this thing, and it's not the easiest read, simply because there is a lot of information. There are quite a few different points of view, but I think the story is so compelling, and the overarching theme of the environment and what happens when you can't save it anymore, all you can do is try to prolong keeping it around, is really fascinating and quite with the times, to be honest. So it was definitely a book that I am very, very glad that I heard of. I had heard of it before Canada Reads. I believe I heard Kayla from Books and Lala potentially. I think she may have talked about this, or at least had it in a haul or something. I don't know that she's read it, but I'm so, so thrilled. And if you can get your hands on it and you like just a good, meaty family story, this is absolutely one worth your time. And sorry, the light's kind of glaring off a bit. Some library books always have the shiny thing on it, and just so good, and I'm so thrilled to have read it. But those are the 4 books so far that I've been able to read from awards, and I do have a few more coming to me, but I'm, number 2 or number 3 on the wait list, so I don't think they're coming to me very quickly, but I'm glad to have at least put a tiny little dent in a couple of the lists, mostly the International Booker. The one from the International Booker I really want to read is The Birthday Party, and I don't think I'm gonna get my hands on that one, but there you have it. I hope everybody is having an awesome day. It's beautiful and sunny here in California, but still pretty chilly for us. So the fact that we're into April and our heat was kicking on this morning says a lot, because that is very abnormal. Normally by April, we're either no heat or we're putting AC on. And I haven't had to kick the AC on quite yet, but we will. I'm sure that's just around the corner. So anyways, enjoy your days. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.